Welcome to the Heads Together podcast. I'm your host, Jill Mokes, and thank you so much, as always, for joining me. So good to have you here. I have an exciting guest for you this week, and this is someone that I've only recently connected with, and her name is Sarah Farley. She is amazing. And of course, any amazing people that come into my world, I have to immediately share with you. So Sarah is a brand writer at the moment, but she has had one of those squiggly careers that has led her to that. So for example, she used to own a scuba diving school in the Caribbean. This is giving you a flavor for the kind of conversation that Sarah and I are about to have. 14 years on from her stint as a scuba diving school owner, she is an award-winning copy chief. She helps brands to understand their audiences, find their voice, and transform their digital experience. Sarah works with all different kinds of organizations, from little startups to great big global behemoths. And she has collaborated with some of the best writers and strategists and creative teams around. Interestingly, Sarah has another string to her bow as well, because she is also the founder of The Writer's Walk. And I just love this. It's a newsletter that is housed on Substack, where Sarah explores the connection between walking and writing. And she shares all kinds of tips on how to use your walks to find inspiration and how to pair them with simple writing prompts to help you bring the most amazing ideas to life via your writing. You know, this conversation with Sarah actually put me in mind of the conversation I had a little while back with Ian Sanders. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and have a listen to that as well. Ian was all about, curiosity and noticing the everyday and using that to infuse your writing. And Sarah, her kind of connection with walking and creativity really reminded me of that. Such a great conversation. I can't wait to share this with you. Before we jump into that, I just want to share with you that this week's episode is sponsored by my virtual online retreat, Rewild Your Business. If you would like a gorgeous digital companion for your week out from your business, Rewild Your Business is perfect for you. It is 5 days of sparks, prompts, things to think about in terms of rewilding your vision for your business, your brand, your offers, and your marketing. And this is all about really cutting away what doesn't belong in your business anymore to allow what does to thrive. Honestly, I believe this retreat is something that we should all as entrepreneurs do kind of twice a year. Twice a year, do this. Summer and winter being perfect times to do this, those slightly quieter work months. Brilliant times to do this, brilliant seasons in which to do this. You're going to find you've got meditations for each day to really get you into the right frame of mind of doing this deep work. You've got yoga practices. You've got lots of other goodies in there that are going to keep you moving through the 5 days of your virtual retreat until you re-enter your business after that week feeling absolutely refreshed, super clear on the next stage of your business. And I hope feeling rested and recharged and ready to go again. So if you would like more information on Rewild Your Business, the virtual retreat, head to rewildyourbusiness.com for all of the details and to sign up for that now. Okay, but first let's dive into this episode of Heads Together, where I want to introduce you to the wonderful Sarah Farley. Welcome to the Heads Together podcast. I'm Jill Mokes, and I am obsessed with cutting through the noise when it comes to growing your business. Each week, via intimate coaching conversations and inspirational stories, I share what it really takes to get the results you want in a way that feels right to you. I am all about attracting higher ticket opportunities, building authentic relationships, and creating the abundant, full-fat version of your dream business. I mean, how many of us have beavered away creating a light version of what we really want? The thing is, I honestly believe when you're outstanding at what you do, there is no limit to what you can achieve. So, are you ready to put our heads together and make it happen? Let's go. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
This is very exciting. This has been quite like a short notice one, hasn't it? It's like we connected and I was like, oh, I want you to come on straight away. So thank you for making that happen. I really appreciate it. I was just going to share a bit actually of how we became connected because my best friend Katie went on a hike to the Gower Peninsula and came back raving about this very cool woman that she'd met on her hike. And that was you. Of course, I said to her, introduce me. I can't have you knowing a cool person that I don't know. Introduce me immediately. Thankfully, she did. And thank you to you for coming on. So how was the hike?
Oh, the hike was amazing. So it's an organised trip. There's a chap called Ian Finch who runs a company called Walk Wild, and he puts together hikes, so day hikes or weekend trips. And he'd organised this weekend in Wales in the Gower Peninsula. So there was a big group of us went to that, staying in a bunkhouse together. And that's how Katie and I met. We were literally just hiking together for the full weekend. So we got chatting as you do when you're hiking and you're chatting with somebody, walking and talking. Leads to great conversations. Big fan of that. And yeah, she mentioned writing connection and she talked about you and she said, you've got to meet my friend Jill. I think you're just going to get on like a house on fire. So yeah, as soon as we'd finished the trip, she made those intros and here we are. Less than a week later, pretty much.
Literally is, isn't it? Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. Very fast.
So good. It just shows you, doesn't it, that sometimes we really overcomplicate things with like scheduling so far in advance and doing this, do that. Actually, no, it's creating a podcast episode can be as simple as finding someone that you just feel really drawn to have a great conversation with and hitting the record button. It's not that complicated. So
if only if everything in life was as that easy.
Oh my God. I would love that. Yes. It's part of my mission is rewilding businesses. So that really appeals to me, this simplified version of doing everything. So yeah, this is up my street. Sarah, I'm so intrigued by your background and your journey to doing what you're doing now, not just professionally, but also the way that has led on to the Writer's Walk as well. Could you just bring everyone who's listening, who doesn't know as much as I do, because I've been obsessively stalking you, give them a bit of information about your background and what you do?
Yes. So I suppose I've had what you'd call a very wiggly career. I didn't kind of go through the usual university kind of leave school, go to university, doing that kind of route. I grew up in the north in Yorkshire and education was an option, but it was an expensive option. So I got a job, because the need to put a roof over my head and pay bills and things like that was more pressing. So I started out in customer service. I had a job working in retail. I worked in Debenhams on the shop floor for a little time. I was made redundant along with a bunch of other people. I ended up working with the building society. And so my career started out kind of like in customer service in a building society, talking to customers all day long. But along the way, there'd always been this kind of desire to work more creatively. So I found my way to working with what's called a brand reprographics agency. What they do is they kind of make all of the print side of things that brands do, like packaging and the artwork and making sure it prints correctly. I got a job with a company that does that as an account manager. So I was now working in a more creative field, but I wasn't doing any kind of creative stuff. I was still very much in that kind of customer service role, but learning more about branding at the same time and what that entailed, and particularly visual design and things like that. Yeah, how did I get there? So I ended up moving to London because I wanted to get out of Yorkshire and go to the big city. And again, I was still in a customer service role, but this time again back in banking, working in a creative studio inside the bank. But again, not doing any of the creative myself, just working with the teams that were doing that and facilitating all of that. Did that for a while. managed to leave London again and found myself a bit tired of the commute and investment banking that I was working in and wanting to just do something different. And I managed to get a job. Initially, it was a temporary job with the Caravan Club. They needed a temporary person to help look after some of the caravan sites that they had around the UK. So I somehow managed to sort of find myself in this role doing this much more outdoor kind of job, which I really liked, being outdoors. I really liked, sort of going out to the campsites and working with the staff on the campsites and doing all of that, sort of traveling around and moving around was really great for me.
Oh, I love that. That was something that I wanted to do once. I read this advert somewhere and they were advertising for people to go and live on site on different campsites, and they would provide you with a caravan and you would go and live on site. I thought that would be the best life ever, just going around to different campsites.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work, for the people that work on the sites and manage it. It's not glamorous like you'd think it would be. I mean, you're making everything about that campsite run, right? From like taking out the rubbish to cleaning the toilets. And so, no glam here. And the customer service side of things, we've cut, and making sure everyone's checked in and they've got the pitch and they're happy, and dealing with unhappy campers when it's raining, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Come to think of it, that sounds awful.
Yeah, and the toilets, I really feel for people who run campsites and have to deal with the shower blocks because they're not pretty necessarily. So yeah, it's a lot of work, but a lot of people have a lot of passion for it because they like to be outside. They really love camping. And so it's a sort of job that you would do because you love camping. And so it's nice because people are doing something that they're interested in and passionate about. Less so when you're just doing a sort of ordinary, office admin, customer service role, which, maybe it wasn't your dream, it's a very different vibe. So yeah, I did that. And then by then I was in a relationship and we'd started scuba diving and we were watching all those shows on TV, things like Get a New Life in the Sun. We just sort of said, let's get a new life in the sun.
Yes. And Ben Fogle's New Life in the Wild. Whenever I watch that, I really crave living off grid every time I watch that program. And then I remind myself that actually, I probably would hate it in real life.
Yeah. All of that chopping wood.
Yeah.
We felt that. And so we started thinking about how could we do this? And, looking back, I just think, oh my God, how ridiculous to think that you could set up a business in an industry that you don't know really much about and you've never worked in. And, we went scuba diving instructors. So, it was like, all of the wrong mix, really, when you think about it.
How brave, though.
I suppose so, yeah. I mean, it's two of us doing it together, so it wasn't as daunting as maybe as one person going like, right, I'm just going to sell up everything in the UK, move to a country that I'm not familiar with, where I have to learn a new language and also do a job I've never done before. It's absolutely bonkers. And I peel it back that way. But we found a little dive shop for sale and it was completely run down. It needed a lot of love. So we started working on that. And I suppose that's kind of when I started writing more because we needed a website and customers would send us emails. And so I did all of that side of things, more the sort of day-to-day operations of the business. So working with the Caravan Club, overseeing as a regional manager, caravan sites, I'd got a lot of good experience within the outdoor recreation industry and how to run an outdoor business. So I had some kind of practical skills there. I did some more training. I became a scuba equipment engineer technician, servicing equipment, repairing things. A million miles away from anything I'd done in London, working in a 9-to-5 office job. All of a sudden I'm like buying tools and setting up a workshop and figuring out how to do a website and things like that. So the writing kind of came from customers, or potential customers sending an email, asking us questions and I would reply. And then doing more outreach, I sort of experimented with a bit of advertising in dive magazines. I started doing a newsletter and I started doing a feature about like one dive site a month and just kind of writing stuff all the time. And noticing the impact it was having, noticing that by having a website at a time when our competitors didn't really have websites, or if they did at that point, they maybe had one page and maybe nobody was checking the email address on that. So I was hearing from people saying, oh, I've emailed some other places, but I've never heard back. You're the only people that have replied. So kind of winning customers by default, because, I was the only one who answered their questions. And that was interesting. I saw some of my competitors were then realizing people were coming to us and booking in advance in this little backpacker town where normally people just rocked up, got off the boat or their flight, and then just went and looked for a place to stay and then found a place to dive. And they'd go door to door to all of these like little hotels and hostels and, B&Bs, and the same with the dive shops. And for us, they would just bypass all the dive shops and come straight to us because they'd found our website. We'd exchanged some emails. I'd answered their questions. I was directing them to places to stay, how much you might need, whether to bring the limitations of credit card there versus paying by cash or traveler's checks, so they'd come armed with all this information.
Can I just say, what a beautiful micro lesson in marketing. Like, it's not rocket science, is it? It's about providing value, being helpful, answering the questions people actually have, not the ones you want them to have because you think that that's what you want to talk about for your business, but actually being responsive. I think that's so interesting to me because I think about all of the people who get so tied up with marketing strategy and the creating of the content that they believe will interest their customers and then never reply to any of the comments on any of their social media posts. And I think, what a crazy situation that is, because that's where the gold is in that building up that relationship. And that's exactly what you did. And the result was they walked past all the other dive shops, came straight to you because they felt like they already knew you and they already had a connection.
Yeah, I guess it made a difference. My background, I'm customer service. I'm not a good salesperson at all. And so marketing, ironically, because my work as a brand writer fits within the world of marketing, but I'm just not very good at it. And, sometimes people say, oh, we need somebody to help us with some sales copy. You're a copywriter. Can you help with that? And I feel physically unwell at the idea that I might have to sell something. I'm like, oh God, no, I'm the last writer that you need. I'm an explainer. I'm not a salesperson. And so I suppose it came from this. My partner and I, my business and, my husband at the time, we were scuba divers. We'd gone on holiday to different places and we'd gone diving in different places. And, we were quite independent. We didn't do package holidays. We'd like book our flights and find a place to stay and then find the dive shop and get in touch with the dive shop. So we were very much kind of tailoring our own experience in that respect. But we knew from diving what we wanted. So for us, it was quite simple. We had this kind of very simple principle for the business. What do we want when we go diving? And we dove with some really great places, in the world. And we dove with some really quite shabby outfits that, seemed to cut corners and didn't feel particularly safe. And so we just had three principles. It has to be safe. This has to be, the equipment's got to be good quality and we need to look after it. And we want people to feel comfortable and safe diving with us.
Yeah.
We're mindful of the environment because we're taking people underwater into a coral reef, which coral reefs are under great threat. And we could see as divers how the impact of human behavior and trash and all these things were having an impact. And also it has to be fun. It's a fun thing to do. So the three things that kind of steered what we wanted to do for the business, because that's what we expected as customers. We'd never worked in the dive industry. And I wonder sometimes if that actually gave us the advantage, because instead of going, oh yes, I'm an experienced industry expert and this is what people want, I was like, well, what do we want when we go on holiday? What do we look for? What questions do we ask when we're, getting in touch with a dive shop? And so that's initially what we put on the website. I was like, okay, this is what we are. This is what we do. And then we put the email address on there and people started sending emails and then they were asking questions. And so they'd be starting to ask questions about, I want to dive, but my partner's really nervous. How does it work if somebody's nervous? I'm like, oh, totally can answer that question for you because I'm that nervous diver. Let me explain, how we do things. somebody would say, you know, I really want to go there, but I'm not really sure where to stay. You know, this is my sort of budget. And so I'm like, okay, well, I can point you to direction of some of the accommodation providers. And then that led to conversations with accommodation providers. And we said, look, you don't really have a website. You're not taking online bookings. We're set up to take online bookings. Why don't we kind of help package it up? If you're happy to recommend us as your dive shop of preference, you know, we can recommend and we can suggest, like, make it easier for the people that are making inquiries we'll take the booking. You know, we can say, hey, you know, we're right here. We'll just pop next door to the accommodation and just say, hey, do you have any availability for a room for 2 people on these dates? Because somebody's asking to dive with us, but they need a place to stay. It was just about making things accessible and easy for people, really, at a time when this was like 2005-06, where not every business was properly online and had this presence and, you know, had the knowledge and the experience. You know, they were just running backpacker destination dive shops. They didn't need to be like marketeers, right? You know, they just needed to be able to run a dive business or a small B&B or small hostel. So that's how we kind of not disrupted, but, you know, kind of got a bit of an advantage because people were starting to search for things online. You know, booking online was becoming a thing. And so in a market where nobody's taking online bookings and isn't replying to emails, you know, it was honestly, it was like catching fish in a barrel. It was actually quite easy because we were doing something that our competitors weren't doing. So it was about a matter of timing and just, we were just slightly ahead. You know, we weren't experts in any of this, but it was very much about, you know, what are people asking from us? What do they need? Let's see how we can fill that. And so from the questions people asked me, I was like, this is a really good question. You know, people are asking about accommodation, need something on the website that talks about accommodation. Let's give them that. So it was a very unrigorous, unscientific approach to user research, customer research. But it was like, well, people are asking me this all the time. Every email I get asks this one question. I'm going to put it on the website because obviously it's information people need. So that's how the website evolved.
I just love this so much. It's so organic, isn't it? It just happened completely naturally. And I think there is just such a lesson in that. Everything is too contrived these days. Everything is just too strategic and we're trying to second guess things all the time. Whereas actually staying curious and listening to what our audience or our potential clients are saying, the questions they've got, not the ones we're trying to post into their heads. I think there's such a lesson in that. I really do.
It was really interesting, yeah.
So this time when you were working and running the dive school, is that really the time when your love of writing started to show itself? Or have you always been a writer? Or when did you really realize, hang on, writing is something I can't not do now?
Definitely when I was doing the dive shop. So a couple of things. I'd been interested in writing when I was younger and I was definitely at school and I used to write and I really was interested in following a sort of artistic and creative career. My dream when I was a teenager, you know, I did music classes. I learned to play the flute. So I was training classically as a flautist. I was also taking acting and drama classes. And my dream was, you know, I want to go on and pursue a sort of acting career, go follow that drama route. I was like, my eyes were searching at, you know, RADA and the Guildhall, you know, and how can I do this? And obviously my life never took me in that direction, but it was there. But I was just constantly finding that like the adults in my life, particularly teachers, were like, oh no, you know, you need to put your feet on the ground. A common piece of feedback to my parents was, you know, Sarah's really smart, but she has her head in the clouds. You know, she needs to stop daydreaming. And I just kind of took these things to heart. You know, I was being told, you're really smart. If you work hard, you might be able to become a teacher or a solicitor. And I'm like, I can't think of anything I don't want to do. You know, like more than these 2 things. I don't want to do that. But everyone's saying, oh no, this is the direction for you, Sarah, because you've got to keep your feet on your ground, be sensible. So I listened to all of that and then just gradually the creative side, the music, the singing, the drama, any writing that I'd been doing kind of fell away. And I just started to tap more into that logical kind of side of my brain, like knuckling down.
Yeah, knuckling down, getting a steady job.
Yeah, I knuckled down. I got a job. I continued my education though. I went to a College of Further Education. And of all the things I could have chosen, I chose business and finance. I then decided to go to university, so part-time while working full-time. And again, I could have maybe gone back to my dream of like drama or music, but I thought, okay, I'll do something more sensible, but what things interest me. And so I did psychology, because I was interested in how people work and how things tick, so I did something that interested me. And people were like, well, why psychology? No, why not a business degree and things like that? And I don't know, I was just kind of trying to find a middle ground, I suppose, somewhere between like this very sort of logical, very good at sort of organizing things and explaining things and making sense of things versus this desire to be a bit more imaginative and a bit more creative and sort of wider thinking. So that's sort of how it happened. But with the dive shop, because I was doing everything for the business and that included writing about the business and with the website, with emails, with a newsletter I started sending out to customers, that's when I started to realize that this was something I really enjoyed. And I started spilling out into other things. So we had a couple of people come diving with us, one of whom had been traveling for quite a while and she was just backpacking around all over. And she had like a travel log, a blog basically. And I'm going back quite a number of years, 20 years now. And so I was like, what is this? And she said, oh, I just write this blog. I'm traveling around and it's just a way for me to let everyone know, keep a record of what I'm doing and tell my friends back home what I'm doing. I was like, that's amazing because I'm kind of doing the same thing, but I just email people. And actually, every time I'm emailing people and they're saying, what's new with you? I'm like, it's the same thing that I'm saying to everybody. Maybe a blog would make sense, instead of having to sort of say the same thing all the time. When people are asking about me, I could just kind of put it together in this blog. So that's what I started. And so I started a blog called Tales from a Small Island.
Which is still your Instagram.
It is, yes. It's still my handle, but I kind of closed the blog site down because I'd got to a point where I was moving on and doing different things and it got me there though. So I started writing the blog. Then I found like in rainy season when it's a bit quieter, I had more time on my hands. You had fewer customers and we weren't diving as much. I just started writing other things for the business. I wrote a sort of set of templated responses to emails so that if I took a day off and somebody else needed to kind of respond to a customer email, they kind of knew what to say. I wrote an instruction manual on how to run a diving business just because I had the time and I wanted to write, I was just writing anything. And then people kept saying to me like, oh, you're so good at writing, you should write a book. And I was like, really? Gosh, how should I do any of that? And I didn't really have a clue. But then around this time, my partner and I were kind of starting to break apart and go our separate ways. And I took a bit of time out and I started exploring, well, what if I did want to do something with writing? How would I even do that? What does a writer even do? How do you even get into it, And so I started looking for degree programs and I was looking at creative writing programs and I was thinking, gosh, 3 years full time back at university. That's a lot. I'm older. Is this something that I want to do? Have I got the money? No. How else can I do this? So I, was just kind of like doing little courses here and there. And I'd gone to San Francisco and I spent a little bit of time there. And I found myself having this fantastic routine where there was a local bookshop, Aardvark Books, not far from the Castro area. And I would go and I would trawl through all of their books and they had this small bookshelf section with books on writing. And I know I found a lot of great books there, including Stephen King's on writing, on that bookshelf. And I just hoovered them all up. I used to go in, find a book and then go find a coffee shop somewhere and I would sit and read the book for a bit. And then I'd go out and I'd go for a walk because I'm in San Francisco and it's amazing and I want to explore the city. So I'd walk around a little bit. And then I would find another coffee shop and I would sit and then I would write for a little bit. And it just became this kind of weird sort of self-led way of learning to write. I would, read a bit about it, go for a walk and, because I'm exploring a city and then I would stop walking and I'd sort of sit and write a little bit. And so somewhere between sort of doing the theory, I guess, is the reading bit of the writing and then going for that walk where it just kind of starts to absorb and I start to assimilate and think about what I've been doing, even not necessarily consciously, then the writing would come. So I had this very, very wonderful short period of time in my life where this sort of emerged. I was very lucky. And while I was doing that, I heard about a master's program back in the UK in Falmouth University, a master's degree in professional writing. And I thought, that's the degree, that's the way. that's going to give me everything I need, because instead of it being just about one area of writing, like poetry or creative writing, it was very much about how you can work and make a living as a writer within a particular discipline. So it was modular. You could make the degree what you wanted it to be. So you could either focus on screenwriting, narrative nonfiction, writing for business, and writing fiction, novel writing. And I thought, this is it. So I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write this novel. And so I applied and I got in. And that meant a return from working in this tiny island in the Caribbean to the UK, working in a small coastal town in Cornwall, which was fantastic, and discovering through the business writing of the course that actually I'd been doing this for a really, really long time. I'd been writing for my business.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, because I didn't consider myself a writer. And the tutor was like, well, you are a writer. You've written a website and you do customer comms and you've done, ads for the business and you write a regular newsletter and you've been writing a blog. What makes you think you're not a writer?
Isn't that funny? And that's actually very common, isn't it? That we want to call ourselves a writer, but we feel like we haven't quite earned it, or we haven't quite got some kind of official stamp that allows us to call ourselves a writer. But, when you write, you're a writer, and it really is as simple as that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that must have felt so good to come back from what must have been an incredible experience in the Caribbean. But I guess things do naturally come to an end, don't they? And life does move on. It does take different directions. But this spark of writing that ignited over there obviously just didn't go away. So you found this master's degree in Falmouth, came and did that, and that must have felt so good, because what I'm hearing is that, like most of us, definitely I was the same. It's how I ended up in insurance. We're young and we don't really fight against the you need a steady job with a pension brigade, But this must have felt like, for the first time, going into education of sorts, purely for yourself, for your own motivation.
Yes. And it felt great. And it was very daunting. I had to take out a loan to pay for it and didn't have any money. I'd come back to the UK with basically a suitcase and pretty much that was it. There's a joke in scuba diving, how do you make $1 million, running a scuba diving business? Start with 2 million. It's not a job you do for the money, right? That was never the goal. It was more about the lifestyle and the changing and doing something you enjoy. But yeah, so I came back with like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to borrow money. I'm moving to a place where, beautiful as Cornwall is, I'd not been there before. And this time I was completely out on my own, but I was just so drawn to it. And it just felt like the absolute best thing for me to do. And it was daunting. I was really worried I wouldn't be up to the mark. As I say, yet didn't think of as a writer. But it turned out that most people there were in the same boat. Like, the reason why we're doing this degree is because we wanted to be a writer. We were aspiring and we didn't see ourselves as that. I remember the course director one time saying, you are writers. You got onto this program because we see you as writers. You wouldn't have got here if we didn't think you had what it will take to, pursue this. They had an application process and they didn't accept everybody. I was like, gosh, wow, this is maybe a bit more pressure as well. But it just kind of helped me to see that, one, maybe I wasn't going to be a novel writer after all, as much as I was really hoping that I would be. Somehow inside of me was this dazzling, like Booker Prize winning work of fiction. Actually, what was inside me was somebody who's very good at explaining things and making things simple and breaking it down for other people, and good at bringing people's voice to life. So what I'd found with the business was, obviously I'm British, my partner was British, and so I put everything together with the website. It was in UK English, British English. And our customers were coming to us primarily from the US and Canada, but, mostly from the US. And I had recognized that I was changing the way that I was writing when I was communicating with those customers. So somebody would send an email and I would mirror my language and tone to theirs. So I'd realized that, like, well, this kind of seems a bit crazy to be having a very UK centric website when you're a business in the Caribbean and everyone here speaks English with the Americanized, North American kind of accent and speech pattern. And all of my customers are writing to me in US English. I should be writing to my customers in US English. So that, I guess, was a shift. And I didn't really know much about brand writing or tone of voice, but I just recognized that I need to speak my customer's language. And I suppose that for me is the difference maybe. As you said, with marketing, it can all feel very strategic and contrived. And I certainly see that in the brand world. Brand tone of voice is often devised or designed by strategists who say, well, these are our values, therefore we think the tone should sound like A, B, or C. And then they bring somebody like me and say, can you bring this to life? And I'm like, wow, no, what made you decide that your tone is these 3 words? How did you get there? What does that sound like? And then they'd be saying, well, that's for you to decide what it sounds like. I'm like, well, kind of isn't, because you've come up with 3 ways of describing something, but no, you haven't actually explained what it is. This is such a strange way about going about somebody's voice and personality, and I know that this is often how it's done, but for me, it was like, surely it's got to come from a place of authenticity and somewhere, I need to listen to the people that have kind of founded this company or who are the beating heart of this business, because I want to hear how they speak, because surely that's where some of this voice is actually coming from. It's got to be coming from somewhere real. It feels like you're doing a tick box exercise or you're trying to paint by numbers, by doing it this way. And that just didn't feel natural to me. So I looked back at what I'd been doing and just like, this was more about my brand voice for the dive shop started to become less about me and more about the customers. So in the branding world, there's an awful lot of talk about brand engagement and all the rest of it. And, this is what you're trying to do. And marketing teams are pumping out like thousands upon thousands of direct mail emails all the time, hoping to hook just a few people in. I was getting something like an 80 to 90% conversion rate from inquiry to booking. One, in part because nobody else was replying to their emails. So it was, like I say, I kind of had a sort of winning formula there without realizing it, but also because I was listening and giving them what they needed. I wasn't forcing anything on them. I was just answering questions because, as I say, I've never been good at sales. So it was all about customer service. My way of doing writing for a company is all about customer service rather than sales. So it's why I've never leaned naturally to advertising, because I'm not very confident or comfortable with that. It's why I'm very good at explaining things, because that's my forte. So brand working worked out quite well because it's very much about the foundation for how a brand speaks and the language it's going to use and how that connects with the people that you're speaking with. Where do you find those points of connection? How do you start a conversation? And I feel, like you say, with the social media side, brands pump things out and then people respond, and then the brand doesn't communicate or respond to the customer or the person on social media. I'm like, well, this isn't engagement. Brands talk about engagement, but what they want really is they want a soapbox. They want everybody else to listen to them. I was like, no, the only way you get this engagement is it's a conversation. And I know at scale and massive international global brands are going to struggle be able to give that one-to-one personal service.
But the ones who do massively stand out. So going back to your experience with the dive school, you stood out, and partly it was because no one else was doing that. And I think there's such a massive lesson in that of how important that is. So Sarah, I'm interested in how the writer's walk came into being. So you're working as this brand writer, you're a very successful brand writer, but that's not your only outlet for writing, of course. Is the writer's walk a community? Is that how you would describe it?
I'd like it to be, although because it's a newsletter, it doesn't have that same kind of format. I write it and I publish it through Substack. So people can add comments, and people do, but often people just reply to the newsletter edition that gets sent out. So sometimes, people, and I'm having one-to-one conversations behind the scenes sometimes with people who read something that resonates and they then respond. So I've then got the social media. I'm on Instagram and I'm trying to encourage people to kind of join in conversations there as well.
For me, the Writers' Walk feels like it will be a community, and maybe that's the journey it's on at the moment, isn't it? I think, and I see this a lot actually with Substack. I think Substack's really good at this as a platform for building community. And I can see that happening with the Writers' Walk. It's a beautiful, I'm going to put links obviously in the show notes for everyone to follow or go and check that out. But it is a really beautiful newsletter that you put together. I love it.
Thank you.
Tell us a bit about the format for that and why did you start it?
So I'd stopped writing Tales from a Small Island quite a number of years ago. And, they say there's like, that's getting good at something you love. I'm good at helping other people. I'm good at writing for other people and I'm writing in their voice. So I say to my customers, these are your words, you own them. They're your voice. They're your values and your opinion, your viewpoints on things. So I'm always writing as somebody else. I'm effectively a ghostwriter. And I was starting to feel like I wasn't really doing any writing of my own anymore. And I wasn't writing creatively as much anymore. So I wasn't really interested into like short stories, but I hadn't written one for the longest time. When you're working all day long doing a thing, sometimes, do electricians spend their evenings rewiring things when they've spent all day doing electrical work? Probably not. And so I wasn't doing anything for myself in terms of being a writer. I felt like I wasn't flexing my skills in as many directions as I would like.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something and I wanted to write something that was about me, that I could actually say that was in my voice. And I was feeling like I was losing my voice among all of this writing for other people.
That's definitely occupational hazard, isn't it? I think for brand writers.
Yeah. I know writers who's got a screenplay inside them or a novel, and it often takes a long time to emerge, if at all, because you're doing all these other things. And when most of us are multifaceted, we don't just have one singular interest. We don't have just like, well, we're writers and that's all we do. People might be into music or going to gigs or to art things or sport. So all of these activities and things you're pushing yourself into, there's only so much time in your day to do it all. It was a strange sort of thing because I also like walking and I like going hiking, and I'd started to notice a connection within myself where walking had become part of my sort of daily working life. So I live in central London.
As beautifully indicated by the siren just then.
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, don't apologise.
Brick Lane comes back to life and reminds us. Yeah. So when I got back to London, so I did my year in university in Falmouth and then I moved back to London. I'd lived here previously, but I moved back because it felt like the most logical and obvious place to be if I wanted to start my journey as being a brand writer, especially being freelance and deciding to go out on my own. And so I discovered that, well, I always knew this. I hate the tube. I feel claustrophobic on it. And so I was avoiding going on the tube. And so I would walk often to meetings. Even the buses would be crowded. So if the bus was too full, I'd just start walking. And then I realized quite quickly I could walk there in the same amount of time as it was taking the bus to get me places. So I'd walk to and from meetings, and I'd started to notice that when I wasn't doing that sort of walking as much, I was sort of often feeling like I was a bit stuck. Things were a bit slower to kind of come out of my head and onto my screen. And I started wondering about that. What am I doing here? And sometimes if I'm working on something, I might just go for a walk, clear my head, go for a walk around the block. Maybe the idea will come to me, and the ideas would come to me. And so quite a few years ago, I started exploring, is there some kind of connection here for me? Is this my process? You hear about writers who have a process. You hear about writers and authors who go, dedicated to every day. They will do 500 words. Absolutely. That's it. And they make this a habit and a practice. And I thought, I wonder if there's something here that's like a kind of like a habit or a practice for me. And so I started paying more attention to it. But it was really, and I hate to keep kind of bringing back things to the pandemic because, it is quite a number of years ago now. But when we were locked down and we weren't allowed to go out for very long and we only had those 30 minutes, I felt like I'd been cut off from something really important, which was this time of walking. And so that's when I started to explore this is really important. It's actually doing something for me creatively and imaginatively. What is that? So I started thinking about how I felt. I'd go for a walk and just go, could have just a walk around the block, 5 minutes be the thing that I need? Or do I need to walk for longer? Is it a case of walking fast? Do I have to walk for a really long time before these ideas come? And I started to pay attention to what was happening for me when I was walking, and when that moment would come from getting out of my own head to just having sort of feeling like the ideas are flowing. And so I discovered that it takes about somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes of a nice, good, brisk walk for me to start letting go of whatever's on my mind or preoccupying me, and start to actually drift, imaginatively. And I think it's because that's the point at which your body starts to release endorphins. When you're moving and you're exercising, there's a point when your body releases endorphins. And I started to notice that when that happened, I would just let out a big sigh. And then whatever was bothering me would start to drift away, and I wouldn't be able to hold on to the thought that was holding me back. It would just almost be like it's flying out of reach. And that's when I'd find the other part of my brain would kick in, and I'd start being a bit more observant, noticing things, and things would start to come in. So I started playing with that, and this became a sort of idea, but not one that I really shared with people. It was just, when I'm stuck, I go for a walk. That's it. Yeah. So then I kind of started thinking about what to write about. And I thought, well, I like walking. I like writing. These are the things I could write about. I don't know whether anybody else would be interested in this. And I then spent the absolute longest time trying to think about a format for this. Would I write it down as a book? What would that look like? Maybe I could show people, maybe I could run some workshops doing this. And then one day the name just came to me, and I just thought, that's interesting. Let's see if I can, I don't know, can I get the URL, the domain for that? And I could, because it was available. I was like, there's a sign. And I got the social media handles. And then I thought, maybe if I write about this, how would I do that? And I dug out my old Tales from a Small Island blog, which is archived. And I was like, I wonder if this would be the right format. By then, people were not on the old blogger sites and things. They were using Substack. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And what I liked about Substack was the fact that it's not a newsletter on its own, and it's not a blog site on its own. It's a combination of two. So you can email out this post to your subscribers, as well as the content that you created sitting on the website as well. So it's evergreen. I thought maybe that's the way. So I started tinkering with it, and I had a very complicated format initially where I would go, right, I'd talk people through like walking first, and then I would explain a bit of research, like some research that I would include, and then I would include something for them to watch, like a video clip, and then I would include something for them to read, like a book link.
We always start thinking more is more, don't we? I think.
Yeah. And I kind of drafted it down. I started to try and draft a post like this, and I was like, oh, there's a lot here. This isn't going to be sustainable, because what if I can't find a video link somewhere of every single time? And then I was just, maybe it's just walking and writing. I'd gone back to Falmouth. I'd gone back to an event at Falmouth University, and there was another writer who'd done the same program as me, but a couple of years earlier before me. And we'd both been at this event, and we met for breakfast the next day, and we were chatting, and I said, I've got this idea and I'm not quite sure what I want to do with it. And I explained it to him, and he was like, I think this is a fantastic idea. I think you should do it. You just got to put it out there. Until you put it out there, you don't know. So I was like, I spent so long doing brand stuff. My brain immediately went to, well, who am I writing this for? Who is my audience? What do they need? How do I'm like, immediately I went into work writer mode. And so he gave me a lot of encouragement. And, we were saying, like, what are you doing for the rest of the day? And I said, well, I'm actually going to go for a walk. And he said, well, of course you are. And so I did. And I went for that walk, and I really thought about it. And I thought about the encouragement he was giving me, which was fantastic. I'd only mentioned the idea to a couple of people at that point. Friends knew about it, but nobody in the writing world. And I thought, well, here's somebody who's really encouraging me. He's a brand writer too. And he also does his own creative writing and his own other writing as well. So I thought, right. And so I came back from that walk, and I was like, you know what? I think it just needs to be walking and writing. So that's how we went for it. I just kind of thought, right, let's pare it back down to something really simple.
Oh, and what a winning formula that is. I just want to go back to something that you were saying earlier when you were in San Francisco. and how this routine grew there, which was consuming something in the cafe, then going for the walk, then creating. So that connection, I guess, started there, didn't it? Of the writing and the walking becoming connected for you.
Yeah, for sure. I even have a playlist from San Francisco called Walk the City.
Do you? I was going to say,
Yeah.
so do you see that as a connection, and that being the birth really of this connection between the writing and the walking?
I didn't until much later.
Didn't you?
I didn't know because I would walk around San Francisco and I didn't always wear headphones and listen to music, but sometimes I did. And I'd made a playlist and I called it Walk the City. And I'd completely forgotten that I still had this playlist 15, 14 years later. And I found it actually, I think last year. I was like, oh my goodness, wow, I even have a playlist with the walking idea in it. So yeah, that's when I realized that actually this really started for me, many years earlier, like walking around San Francisco, a bit of time spent like reading about stuff.
Yeah. So a bit of a creative spark.
And creative spark. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. And so for the Writer's Walk, which is now this amazing Substack, and like I say, I'm going to drop a link to it in the show notes. Where do you see that going? What do you see that becoming? Or is it that you're not sure yet and you're letting it kind of take its course?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I do have some ideas, but I'm kind of seeing where it goes as well. I like the formula. I think it's working. Very simple. I just pick a theme and that theme becomes the idea for the walk and how you can use that walk to kind of observe and pay attention and then spark ideas. And then I pair it with a writing prompt that links that theme as well. So there's a connection between going for a walk with an idea or a focus in mind. And then the writing prompt helps you bring that focal point out in a creative way. So it's a really great, simple format.
We should say, shouldn't we, actually, that this isn't just a newsletter that you kind of can sign up to and read, although you can if that's what you want. There is this interactive part and you can become, you go on the writer's walk as well. So like you say, you have the theme and the writing prompt, which I think is beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, the idea is that you could just give you an idea, it's really about observation. People say, I'd love to be a writer, but I don't know what to write about. Like, well, there's things everywhere you look that you could write about. So the walk is very much about get you out of your normal space and your normal headspace or physical space. When you walk, you might be looking at color or paying attention to sounds, or it could be all sorts of things, how you're feeling inside. It could be a walk to pick up the trash, or walk around a local park, or walking a street that you walk all the time, like your local neighborhood that you're familiar with. But the idea is to look at it with fresh eyes and find things that you show interest in things, because things aren't, I don't think, interesting in and of themselves. Things are inherently interesting. Things become interesting when we focus our attention on them and see something of interest in them. So you might have been walking past a building for years and never really given it a second thought. But if you just stop and go, hang on a minute, yeah, I didn't notice that doorknob, or I didn't notice that weird window that they've got up there. Now there's something more interesting because you're being interested in it. And then the idea is that you take that focal point of that interest and then you follow that strand and use it as a prompt to write with. That's where the format is. So I'm kind of seeing where it goes and seeing what people kind of tell me in terms of their comments, because as I say, it was very much more about, I want to write something and have, like in my words for a change, and I'll see if it lands. People will like it or they won't. Maybe it'll appeal to writers. Maybe it'll appeal to walkers. I don't know until I do it. And so it feels a bit scary in a way, because if I was doing this for a brand, I'd be very much more strategic about, well, what exactly you want to do with this? What's your objective here? Who actually are we speaking to? I'm like, I haven't really got a clue. I'm learning that as I go by listening to the people who find their way to it and say, oh, I think this is really interesting. So I'm finding that people that like being outdoors, camping, are finding it interesting. People who like hiking, and I'm finding that writers are finding it interesting. So the idea isn't to be a massive hiker that I'm not saying to anybody, go and do 20 miles in a day and this is what you need to become a writer. Absolutely not. There are ways you can channel this approach into just going for a walk around the block. And I do one where I say, walking to work, if you work from home, use your walk as a way to kind of get your head in the game, as it were. So Who knows? I've started to do in-person walking and writing workshops, or workshops as a few people have been calling them, because people have asked me to do that. So I've got more of those lined up so I can kind of introduce people in person to what I'm doing, explain the concept, and we go on a short walk together, really just a short walk, just about 15 minutes is all it takes for me to show people what I'm doing as I'm paying attention. And then I sort of guide them with some writing prompts. And you don't need to be a writer to do this. We're all having to write every day in various ways. It's just about channeling that in some other way. So yeah, but we'll see, maybe more workshops are in the line for sure.
It's a watch this space at the moment, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
If someone would love to have you facilitate a workshop for them or with them, where's the best place for them to find you, I guess is what I'm saying. So I know we've got the Substack, but is there anywhere else that people should be looking for you?
LinkedIn's a good spot to look at me, just because a lot of my former clients, current clients and, people kind of write testimonials about me and my work. So you can hear about me in my customers' words rather than me saying what I do. So that's a really good place to do it. And yeah, it's actually how I find a lot of, working partners and collaborators and clients. So yeah, that's a really good spot to do it. Yes, because I'm very open to that. People, like I say, are starting to ask me, and within my work that I do with brands, training is a key part of that. So I do things like that, and I'm always trying to get people to come for a walk with me. Instead of sitting in a windowless, stuffy office with aircon and artificial light, let's get outside. And people actually really value that. The amount of times people say, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Let's get out of the office." People just need the invitation to actually get out of their normal workspace. I say to my clients, the idea that the answer you're looking for is unlikely to be staring you through the blue light of your laptop. You're going to find it in the least expected moment. And probably when you're not staring at the problem, you need to step away from it. So yeah, people really love that.
Wonderful. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. What a beautiful conversation. What I love about this conversation is that you've been so generous sharing your story. And I really appreciate this in people. You're someone who's very humble and also very able to share the kind of the good, the bad and the ugly, and say, well, I didn't like to do that, or I didn't think I was good at that, or I wanted to go in this direction, but I didn't choose to. And I love it when people are open enough to share their whole story. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. And like I say, for everyone listening, I'm going to put the links in the show notes where you will find out more about Sarah. Definitely go and check out her Substack, The Writer's Walk, because it is a really, really good one. And Substack is getting busy, and I definitely kind of thinning out a bit and pruning the number of Substacks that I subscribe to, just because I don't want to subscribe and then not do them justice by actually consuming and reading them and opening them, etc. And The Writer's Walk is firmly on my list of ones that I am absolutely subscribed to, opening, reading. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for giving me the time and for listening. It's been a real treat. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. And bye for now, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for listening.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and that getting our heads together this week has filled your mind with what's possible. If you love the show, would you do me a massive favour, please? Would you leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts? It would really help me put more heads together, reach more ears and expand more minds. Until next week, bye for now.